This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you back to another episode of GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Chris Blades, and before I get started here today, I want to make sure I remind you guys, as always, if you haven't already, to subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you're always on top of when we drop our latest stuff. Make sure you never miss an episode. Also, if you could please give us a 5-star rating, write us a nice review. Be very appreciated, very helpful. See what you guys like, what you guys dislike, ways you can improve, all that stuff. And also, if you're on social media, we're on social media, so you can find us there, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk, we can chat, we can discuss, we can debate, and we can get each other through these very pressing Rona times. Obviously, I mean, assuming you aren't currently living under a rock, which, I mean, if you are, you probably don't have the Wi-Fi to hear this, or data really to hear this. But if you aren't, then you obviously know that the Rona's going on, shut all sports down. Haven't really got a whole lot of good news recently regarding anything, honestly. Then no matter where you go, what you turn on, what you're watching, if it has to deal or it's talking about things that were affected by the coronavirus, COVID-19, it's usually all bad news. But in this episode, we're going to talk about a couple of good things that have happened in the last couple of days that, I mean, not exactly, they're not going to change anything, but at least it'll give us some stuff to do potentially and some stuff to watch as we, again, try to get through this time with no live sports. Very unprecedented, but here we are. So the first bit of good news is not for us, the viewer or the fan of the sports, but for actually the participants in said sports, specifically the college athletes. So I believe this was Monday. So yeah, on Monday, the NCAA Division I Council Coordination Committee voted Monday to grant spring athletes an extra year of eligibility after the coronavirus pandemic shut down spring college sports in 2020. However, winter sports were not included in the extended eligibility, which excludes basketball players from earning an extra year per the NCAA. Division I rules limit student athletes to 4 years of completion in a 5-year period. The NCAA wrote, the council's decision allows schools to self-apply waivers to restore one of those seasons of competition for student athletes who have competed while eligible in the COVID-19 shortened 2020 spring season. All spring athletes will be able to return to their respective schools in 2020-2021, though programs will be forced to offer less or zero aid or match what they provided this year. According to the Athletics, Nicole Auerbach, and this is all from an article on Sports Illustrated.com. So, I said if you can look it up for yourself there. Earlier this month, the committee agreed it was appropriate to provide eligibility relief for spring sports and said it would reach an official decision later. This is obviously being later. The idea of giving spring athletes an extra year of eligibility came with some logistical hurdles, which I believe we kind of talked about in the beginning, just like how it would all work out. I feel like, obviously, not knowing exactly how these things work and all the different decisions and stuff like that that go into it, I feel like I had an idea, but obviously the people in the know came up with what they thought worked. The idea of giving spring sports athletes an extra year of eligibility came with some logistical hurdles, like I said, such as how such a proposal would affect roster size limitations and programs' financial situations. Last week, the NCAA announced a massive slashing of revenue distribution to member schools for 2020 in response to the lost revenue during the shutdown of sports, which obviously, and part of that was the NCAA tournament, which is how a lot of these schools, especially the schools with good basketball programs, bring in a lot of their money, because, I mean, the NCAA tournament is billions of dollars every year. So, obviously, there's going to be some cuts having to be made with that not taking place. Earlier this month, the NCAA canceled, obviously, the March Madness and all winter and spring sports. Decision sparked an outcry from players, coaches, and athletic directors, particularly seniors who had their final seasons come to a sudden halt. The move even prompted Iowa track and field senior Allison Warman to create a petition asking NCAA to grant seniors another year of eligibility, which, in fairness, they did, because I guess for her, because she's a track athlete, so that's spring sport. Unless I guess, technically, unless she only did indoor, which is winter, but I'm assuming she was a spring sport track and field athlete. On March 20th, Division II spring sport athletes were granted next year of eligibility. College athletics are among the many sports affected around the globe with the coronavirus. And obviously, if you didn't know, then the U.S. currently has the most confirmed cases in the world. So there is that, and we don't know how this will all trickle over into the fall. But as of this moment right now, we know U.S. is in bad shape now. I know this is, again, it's not a conspiracy theory podcast, but just a quick aside on that. Obviously, we don't really know what the numbers are either here or around the world because obviously very few countries planned ahead on this. South Korea is probably one of the few that was like very on top of it early, so they were able to catch most of the stuff. Like even here, we didn't start testing heavily until the last couple of weeks, and even then, like you really only get tested if you have like the severe cases. So we don't even know. Like, the official numbers aren't even really official, but you can say the same thing for, like, China and other places. Like, it's hard to say like, no numbers are actually official, in my opinion, just because, again, these are the ones that count, but there's a lot of people that either tried to get tested and couldn't, or they didn't have the testing available. So it's like the numbers in almost all of these countries, and honestly around the world, are probably higher than we know. So, again, just serves as another reminder to make sure you wash your hands, quarantine, self-isolate, practice social distancing, all that stuff, just because you don't know who has it. I mean, a lot of experts say to operators as if you do already have it or you're around somebody that does, just so, like, again, you stay as healthy as possible. But, yeah, that was just a quick aside on that. But, yeah, back to the NCAA. So, good for them. Obviously, they are known for making decisions that cause them some backlash, just because, again, they're very strict rules and other things. But in this scenario, I think, at least for the spring athletes, they got this one right. We'll talk about the winter athletes in a second, but for the spring athletes, they didn't even get a chance to start their season. So it would have been rough for them, and it would have been hard for like those seniors to have their seasons end before it even began. And they didn't get a really chance to, like, I mean, they probably worked out and trained and maybe got through some preseason stuff. They didn't really do any. There wasn't a whole lot of games played, or not a whole lot of events took place for the spring sport athletes, so it's not right. I don't want to say not right, isn't the correct term, but it seemed a little bit unfair to them to just be like, all right, yeah, you guys only get 3 years of eligibility. And that just didn't. It seemed like a very simple decision at the time to make, and obviously it took some time to officially make the decision, but good for the NCAA for making the correct decision, in my opinion, and obviously the opinions of a lot of people around the sports world, just based on the reaction and the reception to this decision. There's not really one person that's saying it's a bad idea, other than obviously the whole money and scholarship thing is the interesting part of this. I know they mentioned a little bit about how the all-spring athletes will be able to return to their respective schools, though programs will be forced to offer less or zero aid from after they provided this year. So I have to look to see how that affects things, because obviously with the scholarships and stuff, this was kind of the knock on the play in the beginning, was that you have these spring sport athletes that are coming in, like this incoming freshmen for next year, that were supposed to take some of these slots of the seniors. But now since the seniors potentially could come back, then it's like, all right, and how does that work? Or like, because I mean, a lot of these spring sports, like most sports outside of like football and really basketball, and most schools don't make a whole lot of money. So it's like, can they really afford to be paying for extra people, if that makes sense? Like, you already have this many scholarships, or I mean, honestly, or like I said, maybe they don't even have the money, because again, you have this a lot of scholarship money, and if now you're paying for extra people, then you just don't have the money to give out to everybody else. So that's kind of the unfortunate aspect of it, or at least that could be the unfortunate aspect of it, is the fact that like I said, these guys have enough money for these X amount of players, but now they have then now they have more spots than they have like money to give out for people. That's the only thing. Obviously, I don't know the business side of this in terms of like how much money each of the schools brings in and what money they have allocated to different sports and stuff like that. So that'll be for the schools to figure out. But that'd be my only concern is just how they make sure that these guys are properly funded. Though, I mean, a lot of spring sports don't have like the full scholarship. Like they give like partial scholarships, like half scholarships or something. Like full scholarships are really just like for the major sports that can afford it. Obviously, in football, basketball, maybe some other sports depending on the schools, but not a whole lot of spring sports from what I know. Obviously, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but from what I know and from what I've heard and from what I've learned from talking to people that did participate in spring sports in college, like not a lot of them got the full scholarship to go wherever they went. They got like partial or like some financial aid or whatever. So hopefully they're still able to get something because, again, college isn't cheap, and especially if you're going for the extra year. Now you're technically a grad student, so you got to take grad school, student classes and all that stuff. You can't just like go to play sports necessarily, unless you graduate early or something. But again, they're playing spring sports, so you have to be there through the whole year. It's not football. But if you came back for like a fifth year, you could just graduate from grad school in December. Then now you're good and you can train all this stuff up and through the draft and stuff, which is obviously would be the spring semester. But you don't need to be there because you already graduated. So that's a different thing for them. They need to. I don't know exactly how it would work if they're not taking classes. But yeah, so like I said, good for the spring sports athletes, rough for the winter sport athletes. Though, in fairness to them, or in fairness to the NCAA for their decision, the winter sports, like the regular season was done. Like you were just looking at like postseason tournaments and like the championships and stuff. So there's no obviously there's no NCAA tournament for basketball, no conference tournaments for most other sports. No big wrestling's another sport that gets like televised. Depending on like where you are, I know it's a big thing like the Big Ten schools and some Pac-12 schools. But not every school has a big wrestling program, but I know it's on TV. Let me just put it that way. So I know that's another thing that people are going to miss out on. So there's no champions crown, none of that stuff. So that's the unfortunate part for them. But like I said, in fairness to the NCAA, their regular season was done. So they played through most of the season. They didn't play the postseason stuff, which again not everybody qualifies for anyway. I guess everyone qualifies for in basketball at least for their conference tournament. So there's that, but a lot of other sports. Well, I guess they're back in all sports is the conference tournament. But then there's no official conference championship, but you do have the champion from the regular season. So it was tough. It's tough for them. Obviously, it would have been nice to be able to not have some of these college basketball players, their seasons or their careers end on such a weird note, where it's just kind of over. They didn't get the chance to participate in the NCAA tournament. Didn't get a chance to go out with a championship, stuff like that. That is unfortunate for them, and I do wish that they had a chance to do that. But also, now the only good thing I will say in that regard for these players is that now they can just go pro and make their own money. Like obviously, again, people appreciate the time they spend in college and like the memories and the things that they are able to build and be able to be a part of while in college, but also a lot of you guys, I would imagine, have aspirations to go pro. So if they do, then they can go off to make money. And even if they don't necessarily have aspirations to go pro, they're just like playing out the rest of their college career. Now they can go like use their degree to get a job and again make money. Because when you're playing for the NCAA, you can't make any sort of money, but now you can. So at least they're not getting exploited for their services anymore. So that's the only positive side of this I can see for those guys is just the fact that at least now they can go and get paid, as opposed to if they came back for a fifth year, while it would be cool, but now it's just an extra year giving up of your money earning potential, I guess you could say, like of years that you could be making money, you gave up another year of that to go continue in college. And it's just like, again, while it's cool and while, like I said, I don't knock anybody that wants to stay in college as long as they can, because in the right scenario it is an enjoyable time. But at the same time, if I'm a guy or a girl that went to college for, at least for basketball, because again, it's easier to go pro in those sports, or even like for like track, if you wanted to, if the Olympics are your thing, all right, now you can get ready for the Olympics and maybe potentially qualify because there's no Olympics this year, it's pushed back to next year. So now you have a chance to get in on those qualifiers that maybe you wouldn't have had because you were in college or whatever, if you're like a swimmer, stuff like that. So yeah, that's what I'm saying, like it gives you chances to go on and do more professional things with your life, which, again, allow you to make money, which you weren't able to do in college. So there's a silver lining, I should say, to it. is the fact that, all right, maybe you can't get an extra year. At least now you won't be exploited by the NCAA, which from my end of things seems like at least a minor positive. Again, their season got cut short. It is like a weird scenario, but again, now they can at least go and make some money, which, in my opinion, is never a bad thing. If you can go out there and make money for yourself and for your family and whoever, not a bad thing. And again, they won't. I've been saying it again a lot, but they won't be getting exploited for their labor and services from the NCAA or from their schools or whatever, which you shouldn't want. So good for them in that regard. Like I said, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is at this point. There's not really too much you can do unless I don't think they're going to retroactively make another decision on this. I think this is kind of what they decided. So shout out to the spring sport athletes. If you want to stay, you can. If you want to leave, you can. Again, it's up to you. But for the winter sports athletes, again, they don't really have that choice. Like I said, a lot of those guys or girls that were ready to make that leap to the professional level probably weren't going to stay past this year anyway, like, even if they could. I don't think. Obviously, everyone's different, but I would like to think that these guys were ready to get on and move on to the professional ranks. But I guess we'll see. See what the outcry from those guys is. But like I said, it was a tough for the winter sport athletes to ever be included just because their season was basically over. You can't let them play. They played a full season already. Now getting them a chance to play another full season, it would have been a lot. At least the spring sport, they never really started, so makes sense to me. But yeah, after we come back, we're going to talk about some more good news we got in the form of a highly anticipated documentary that is coming out sooner than expected. So we'll talk about what that documentary is, when it's coming out, all the details that we have surrounding that, and also just like why we should be excited for it. Because I know I am, definitely. Well, I mean, on top of the fact there's nothing else to watch, I'm excited for I was going to be excited for whenever, but now at least I know it's coming in within the next couple of weeks. So we should all stay tuned for that. But again, we'll talk about that documentary right after this break. So stay tuned.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Again in the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, if you hadn't heard, there was a big Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls last hurrah. It's called the Last Dance. Funny enough, but yeah, the big documentary on Michael Jordan, basically that was supposed to come out in June, post NBA Finals, or around the time of the NBA Finals. Which again made sense, but due to the fact that we don't know when the NBA will be back, it would have been kind of weird for just to hold on to it until then, just because there's nothing else on TV. And I mean, we'll talk about this in a second, but the whole aspect of like, oh, we need to release now, get ratings, like that thing was going to get ratings anyway. Again, it's Michael Jordan, not depending on who you ask, but kind of depending on who you ask, the greatest basketball player of all time. And obviously, people will throw LeBron in there. People could throw Kareem in there, depending on if you're an older guy from LA. I guess there's other people that could potentially be in that conversation too, but a majority of basketball fans around the world will say, and in my opinion, rightfully so, that Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time, one of the greatest athletes of all time. So anything involving him is going to get views. So I'm a little miffed on that. Like, oh, you're going to get amazing ratings now. Like, again, everyone's going to be home to watch it. Everyone's going to watch it regardless if you're a basketball fan. Like, non-basketball fans aren't the ones that they're making this for. They're not the ones that are going to be interested in these kind of things. They're not going to be the ones that are watching this. So I don't know who else they were going to try to get. But I will say that at least everyone is home now, so they don't have anywhere to go. You have nothing else to do. So that aspect of it does help. But yeah, so it is a documentary 10-part. Yeah, it's a 10-part documentary series that takes an in-depth look at the Chicago Bulls dynasty through the lens of the final championship season in 1997-98. That year, if you didn't know this, because I know some people did, but if you did know this, the Bulls allowed an NBA entertainment crew to follow the team around for the entire season, and some of that never-before-seen footage will be featured in the documentary, which obviously will give you an in-depth look at that last season. I know that season was kind of a mess just from my knowledge and having worked at the NBA for 2 years and having had to go through some of this footage. I don't know what made it or didn't make it into the documentary, but I knew I was helping find and go through and archive and stuff footage for this documentary. So we'll see how much of the stuff I found that's going to be in there. But yeah, basically, going through that, there was a lot of footage from that time, I guess, surrounding the season, because there was a lot of turmoil with that season. It was like, oh, is MJ going to come back? Is Phil going to come back? Are these guys kind of, or like, are Mike and Scotty done? Like, I think Scotty had to deal with some injuries that year too. It was a whole kind of a mess. There was obviously the final of their 6th championship run, so just like a lot of stuff. I know there was some Rodman turmoil in there. So just from the aspect of the overall season, there's already going to be a lot of stuff to talk about. Now, obviously, because they let a camera crew follow them around for the entire year, we have more access to things that we maybe not have, or I guess maybe not, that we were not privy to up until this point, that will now be released and will now be able to be discussed and dissected and looked at and all that stuff. So any sort of behind-the-scenes stuff or never-before-seen footage for a lot of things is always gets to people's eyes, always gets to people's attention. So, I mean, obviously, again, with somebody like this and somebody on the magnitude of these Bulls team won't be any different. But also, along with that, in addition, ESPN spoke to more than 100 people close to the team and personalities who experienced the run, exploring all angles of the Jordan phenomenon. And the full episodic documentary will air on ESPN in the U.S. and Netflix outside of the U.S. And they have the full schedule for the episodes which we were talking about in a moment. But yeah, so on top of having all this behind-the-scene footage, never-before-seen footage from the run and of the team, they also, like I said, they talked to a lot of people, whether it's like athletes that were growing up during that time, that were experiencing the run, that were obviously basketball fans, people from the Chicago area, television personalities, like I guess I'm assuming other coaches, other players, other people on the team outside of MJ himself, announcers, like, so I guess would probably like popular like rappers or like TV people or TV stars or TV actors or movie stars, stuff like that. Just anybody that was around and old enough to have experienced that final run, because obviously anybody that's like my age in their early 20s, you were even kind of mid 20s, but early to mid 20s, we were young at the time of that run, so most of us weren't really in tune with our sports fandom at that time, and even if we were, we probably didn't understand the significance of it, just because at best, if you're old enough, say you're like 30. All right, so say you're like 30, which means you would have been born in like 1990. So you basically remember none of the first run, because obviously there's no way you could. You were like 3 years old at best by the time the first run ended. So you're like 8 by the time the second run is done. So you probably have an idea, if you were into basketball and sports heavy at that time, you probably have an idea of like the second run. But again, they're all kind of connected. Like the second run's as impressive as it is because the first run happened. If it was, and also I guess the 2-year gap where 1.5 year gap, because he came back in the 94-95 season, and they lost to the Magic in the second round. People don't talk about that a lot, but that's not what I'm here. I'm not here to diminish Jordan's legacy, which is something that people tend to skip over. He sat out both seasons, which he didn't. But yeah, so you're not really, I don't know how big of a sports fan you were, but again, it's not, there's no, not everybody was, if you didn't grow up around the Chicago area, you may not have been a Bulls fan, you might not have cared as much, and also, like I said, you might not have understood the significance of what you were watching. As we've seen, three-peats are hard to come by since then. I know the Lakers did it, and I think that's it. Yeah, Lakers are, I think, the last team to three-peat. I know teams have won like back-to-back, like the Heat won back-to-back, the Warriors won 3 and 4 years. I know the Spurs have won a lot of the time. I don't think they ever went back-to-back. But yeah, so I don't think the team has three-peated since the Kobe, Shaq, Lakers, R.I.P. Kobe. So yeah, that just shows how hard it is to do for one team, not one player, but like one team, one collection of people to do it twice. And it's not an easy thing to do in any sport, let alone. No, that's not an easy thing to do in just the bar, like, end of statement. It's not an easy thing to do in any sport. So yeah, so like I said, it should be interesting if you're a basketball fan, then you're already probably tuned in for this, thinking about when this is going to come out and stuff, and obviously now we have an official date of when it will come out, and the episode breakdown is as follows. So the first two episodes, I should say, will premiere Sunday, April 19th at 9 and 10 p.m., which is interesting to me because that probably means that there will be a bit of adult language in these documentaries, as opposed to why they would have it so late. Because again, nothing else is on, so there's no reason to. They're not competing with anything. They're not trying to make sure we don't overlap with anything else. Like, I guess there's some TV shows on, but most of the major, like the HBOs and stuff, hasn't started their summertime shows by that. Actually, well, I guess if you watch Insecure on HBO, that'll be back. But not everybody watches that, so yeah, so there's not a whole lot for them to compete with at that time. So that's interesting to me that they're starting it that late. The episodes don't start till 9. Then the next Sunday, the 26th, they have a re-air the first two episodes, and they'll premiere episodes 3 and 4, again at 9 and 10 p.m. Then the following Sunday, so all the episodes are going to come out on Sunday. And then they'll do it where they have 2 episodes, they premiere 2 episodes every Sunday for, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, or for 5 Sundays, and then they'll re-air the 2 episodes prior. So, like I said, the 16th, they'll re-air episodes 1 and 2 before 3 and 4. On May 3rd, they re-air episodes 3 and 4 for 5 and 6. Same thing for May 10th, with the premiere of episodes 7 and 8. And then the last 2 episodes premiere on Sunday, May 17th. And that's, again, if you are in the United States. If you're outside the United States, it's going to be on Netflix, but they'll appear on Monday at 11:01. So you get a new episode, 2 new episodes every Monday. You just won't have the opportunity to do the re-air before, but again, it's on Netflix, so you can just rewatch it that way. But yeah, so that's how the schedule breaks down, and I appreciate them doing this. I mean, obviously, some people try to give credit to LeBron because he talked about this on I think it was the Road Tripping podcast, when he was talking to Richard Jefferson and Channing Frye, and I think it was Allie Clifton, I believe. Yeah, that was a part of his thing. Was talking about how the NBA would get so many big ratings if they moved it up and blah blah blah. And I was like, yes, that's true. And I guess you could kind of say LeBron has some pull because, again, the announcement came a couple of days later. But this is not something that was like LeBron. It's not that LeBron was the first person to bring this up. If you're on social media at all, basically anybody that's a sports fan was talking about how they should move the documentary up. Even, like I said, from regular people to ESPN people, and anybody, we're just talking about how they should move the documentary up. Obviously, LeBron being one of the, if not the biggest athlete in the world, when he says things, people pay more attention to it. But at the same time, it's not like he was the first one. So I don't want to give him too much credit for that, because again, it's not like it was his idea. It was already well discussed before he mentioned it, but it's just like the timing of it is funny, you should say. But yeah, so now it's a done deal. And like I said, I do appreciate and I do understand why ESPN did that, and I appreciate them for doing that, just because from a fan perspective and even from their perspective, it's like, what are you holding it on to? Why are you holding on to it? Like, what are you waiting for? Because it's not like you're waiting, before you're waiting for the finals to happen, there's no finals. Or there might not be any this year, and even if there is a finals, it's not going to happen until like, July, August at best. Not even, I'm saying best case scenario, if somehow all this stuff is done, we're able to go back to regular stuff by June, which I will touch on. That may not happen in a couple segments, but yeah. So even in best case scenario, it happens in August. What you're gonna hold on to it until June, just like you were, just because that's when you were scheduled to come out. Like, if it's ready, they'll release it now. It may not have been ready, and that's probably why it's still not coming out. Because they could have, in theory, if they had the date set for then, they could have released it now if it was officially ready. I think they're probably still making some minor tweaks to it. That's why they gave it a couple of weeks for them to make sure the final edits and everything's done. So that's probably the reason why they couldn't just release it outright now, just because, again, things have to be fine-tuned and tinkered with to make sure everything's as good as it can be. But yeah, it was like, if they were able to get it done, like, why would you wait around for it? That's kind of what my thinking was. And honestly, I guess the executives or whoever at ESPN or that was in charge of making this decision decided the same thing. It was like, you know what? They're right. What are we waiting around for? Let's give the people what they want to see. So I appreciate that. But then again, they still did the good thing of spacing it out, because they could just release all the episodes at one time. But you don't want to do that, because then it's like you just get people to just watch it in a chunk, and then boom, no one's talking about it. So at least spacing it out so it happens, it's 5 separate Sundays where it goes on, so keep it in the news cycle is smart. I mean, obviously, there's not much else to talk about, so you don't have to worry about it being overlapped or overshadowed by something, I should say. But still, it was just smart for them to break it down, just because, again, it would have been hard to just release it all on like ESPN Plus or like Netflix or wherever, all at one time, and then just people watch through it in a day or two, and then like no one cares. So that was smart on their part. But I mean, that's probably the rollout plan always. But in theory, they could have just released it all at one time just to give people something to watch. But again, they did it, and this is why these executives are in their position, because they do things the right way, more or less. So smart on their part. And like I said, if you're a basketball fan, you're already probably checking for this. But if you're not, or if you weren't, then you should be, because again, nothing else really on right now, so give you something to watch. And it should be, I mean, if it's anything like the O.J. Simpson like multi-episode docu-series that ESPN and like 30 for 30 did, then, I mean, I guess, is it technically a 30 for 30? I don't know if it's officially a 30 for 30, but like, again, it's an ESPN documentary, and if you know anything about ESPN documentaries with their 30 for 30 series, you know most of them are very well done. I mean, there's not really a bad one that I can think of off the top of my head. I may actually have to list out some of my favorite ones of those. Won't do that today, but very few of them are bad. And I don't expect this 10-part one. Like, there's so many storylines and so many different things to talk about with the Bulls and MJ and that whole phenomenon and stuff that I imagine they could have done more than 10 episodes. They probably have to cut it down to get it to 10 episodes. But yeah, so it's like, this is probably going to be well done. It's going to be good. Again, not really a whole lot of sports for you to watch in place of this, so you should watch it. It's going to be good, and obviously when it comes out, we'll talk about it. But I don't see why a basketball fan wouldn't be excited for this, in my opinion. But to each their own. I know I will be locked and loaded and tuned in and on my couch for April 19th. Is the first? Yeah, this is first Sunday, April 19th, so a couple weeks away. Like I said, I'll be ready to go to watch this one. And then we'll talk about it. So, make sure you watch it so you can know what I'm talking about. I'm going to spoil it for you. If for nothing else, you should watch it for that, because I'm going to be on you talking about it. You don't want to get spoiled. So, do that. But yeah, so after this next break, we're going to talk about another thing. I mean, this isn't technically the NBA. This is more ESPN, but we're going to talk about something the NBA and the players are doing to help give the fans some content to watch during this downtime. So we'll talk about what that is, how it's going to happen, who's involved, all that stuff. So we'll talk about that, like I said, right after this break. So stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, the NBA, or NBA players, I should say, led by, I don't know, I don't say led by per se, but the headliner of this is Kevin Durant. He, of the Nets, leads a field of 16 NBA players who will take part in the NBA 2K tournament to be broadcast on ESPN. Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty of it, this is just, overall, this is a good idea, because, I mean, esports are a big thing in general. I mean, and also, not really a whole lot going on. So a lot of people are playing video games anyway. Plus, I mean, other than, like, you saw like some of the Fortnite stuff, and other things, or I guess, PUBG. I think it was another thing that some players have been, like, they live streaming. That's the thing. A lot of players, even before this, but during their downtime, they play video games, they live stream it. So I was like, all right, why don't we get a bunch of these guys together to and broadcast some of the video games that they do decide to play? And I guess they did it with 2K just because it's sports and basketball related, and obviously this is going to help replace the live sports that we would be watching at this time that we can't. So it makes a lot of sense. And from that regard, or that aspect of it, just to have these athletes play the video games, because, like I said, a lot of them already play video games in their downtime, so might as well televise it, honestly. And plus, it'd be interesting just to see how these guys, like, how competitive these guys are in this setting, because obviously we know how competitive they are on the court, but off the court, like, are they still the same way? Are they more aggressive? Are they more competitive? Are they less competitive? It'd be interesting to see. And obviously, also, a lot of casual people, casual players, or even avid players of the game, are always interested in see how good are these athletes that are in these games. Because obviously we know how good they are in the game, but how good are they playing the game, or using themselves in the game, or just using their own teams in the game? It would be an interesting thing to watch. But yeah, so hold on, give me a second. The NBA, the NBA Players Association, and 2K have partnered to produce an NBA 2K tournament that will air on ESPN and ESPN2 starting this Friday. It was announced, so like I said, very quick thing. But again, I guess it's mainly just, you can just, like, broadcast it live. Though I'm interested to see how that's going to work, because again, people can't be in the same room, so you gotta video people in and stuff. So interesting to see. Like I said, it'll be interesting to see how that works. But the NBA 2K Player Tournament will run through April 11th, according to a statement, and will begin airing on ESPN on Friday with a half-hour pre-show at 7 p.m. Eastern. The tournament will run on ESPN until 8:30, and then is scheduled to transition to ESPN2 until 11:30. 16 NBA players will compete, and I'll get into all the people that are competing in a second. The winner of the event will receive $100,000 to give to a charity in support of the coronavirus relief efforts. This is all from ESPN. We're thrilled to partner with the NBA and the NBPA to bring basketball back to fans throughout the world to help those in need during these uncertain times, said Jason Argent, 2K Senior Vice President, Sports Strategy and Licensing. Entertainment, especially sports, has the ability to bring communities together, including athletes, fans, and families, and we hope that everyone will enjoy the tournament. Players were seeded based on their rating in 2K, which is an interesting way to seed people. But yeah, so with Durant, a 96 overall, in the game as the number 1 seed. Players who were tied in their overall rating were seeded based on tenure in the league. So, like I said, we'll get into the participants in a second. But the schedule for the NBA 2K tournament for the NBA 2K20 player tournament is as follows. Like I said, Friday, April 3rd, ESPN from 7 to 8:30. Then on ESPN 2 from 8:30 to 11:30. Then Sunday, the 5th, on ESPN 2 from 12 to 4 p.m. So that's a little bit earlier in the day. So you will have to be up and at them. And again, I guess noon's not that early, but again, people like to sleep in, so maybe you will forget. And then the quarterfinals will be Tuesday, April 7th from 7 to 11 p.m. on ESPN 2. And then the semifinals and finals will take place on Saturday at a time to be determined. So, yeah, it'll be done within a week. So 4 separate days, Friday, this coming Friday, Sunday, next Tuesday, and then next Saturday. And apparently there's another note that all games will be available as VODs, video on demands, on ESPN 3 following the live competition. So I guess if you wanted to rewatch the games for any reason, they'll be available on ESPN 3. So you could do that there, if you so choose. But yeah, so this is, like I said, it's a cool thing. It's an interesting thing just because I'm curious to see how they chose to get people involved and like how they decided who's gonna take part or who wanted to take part. Just because, again, I imagine if there was a thing that people heard about, a lot of people would want to be involved. But yes, I'm curious to see how they kind of whittled it down to just these 16. Or even, I wonder whose idea this was. I know the graphic that got put out with the seeds was from the boardroom, which is obviously KD's ESPN Plus. I think it's only on ESPN Plus show, or I know I've seen like previews of it on like ESPN, ESPN 2 and stuff, but I think it officially comes out on ESPN Plus. I don't know if it was this KD's idea, was it someone at ESPN's idea, was it someone at 2K's idea? I don't know the exact specificities of that, but again, whoever's idea it was, shout out to them, gives us as sports fans something to watch, which is really all we want during these times. Just anything that we can consume will be consumed. So, like I said, shout out to those guys for giving us that. So, we'll go into the seeding, and it is as follows. Like we already discussed, KD is number 1. He'll play the 16th seed, Derrick Jones Jr., who's a 78 overall. The number 2 seed is Trae Young, who's a 90. Did not know that. I guess it kind of makes sense, but again, it's 2K, not really that relevant. Oh, how's what? All right, we'll get to that in a second. And who will face the 15th seed? Harrison Barnes is also a 78. The 3rd seed is Hassan Whiteside, who's an 87, which is that one's kind of interesting. Don't know about that, especially when you see who else is below him. I'm not too certain about that one, but hey, it's 2K, it's not real life, doesn't really matter. He'll play the 14th seed, Patrick Beverly. That'll be an interesting one, just because I mean, Patrick Beverly is a big talker on the court. I imagine he's not any different when he plays video games, so that's... And Hassan Whiteside is kind of goofy, so that'd be interesting. That'll just is an interesting matchup on its own. You got Donovan Mitchell. Oh, okay. Well, I guess he's recovered, which I hadn't mentioned, but I think all the NBA players that had the coronavirus are now recovered from it. I think there's a report that came out, so good for them. And I guess Donovan Mitchell is healthy enough to do. I mean, obviously, you could, as long as you're not in the hospital, I guess you could play video games while sick. And again, if he's by himself, he won't be around other people to catch it again or to infect anybody else or pass it along to anybody else. So yeah, Donovan Mitchell's in it, the 4 seed, facing rookie Rui Hachimura, who's a 79 overall. Then you got Devin Booker, who, like I said, I don't know how he's an 86 and Hassan Whiteside is an 87. That's absurd, but whatever. He's a 5 seed. Will take on the 12 seed Michael Porter Jr. Andre Drummond, who is an 85 overall. So no, Devin Booker's an 86 overall. Excuse me, I might have said 85, but I meant to say 86. Andre Drummond, who is an 85 overall, is a 6 seed. He'll play the 11 seed Boogie Cousins, which is, I mean, I guess he has some injuries and stuff, so I kind of understand. But at the same time, hey, good for Boogie. Gives him something to do. Because obviously he wasn't able to play this year after the whole torn ACL. Yeah, he tore his ACL, right? Yeah, it was torn ACL. Did over the summer with the Lakers. So, yeah, he has the time. Next is Zach LaVine, who's a 7 seed and also an 85 rating. And he will face the 10 seed DeAndre Ayton, who's also in 85. I don't know how that works. But again, 2K, not real life, doesn't really matter. And then the last matchup is the 8 and 9, 8 seed Montrezl Harrell, who's an 85 overall in the game, will face number 9 seed Domantas Sabonis, who is also an 85 overall in the game. So that is the 8 matchups, the 16 players involved. And I'm curious to see, one, like I said, how good these guys are at 2K, because I don't know. You never really know until, again, you see it. No one really, I don't know. I mean, obviously these guys are competitive, so they're going to do everything they can to win, but I don't know how good any of these guys are, just like off the rip. I haven't heard too much about any of these guys like playing. I feel like KD would play a lot of video games. I know he's kind of reserved, kind of keeps to himself, kind of doesn't go out too much. From what I've heard about him in the past, and obviously he wasn't playing this year, so he had extra time to practice, you would think. So I'm curious about that. I know like guys like Donovan Mitchell, Trae Young, even like Hachimura, Michael Porter Jr., like the younger guys who are obviously going to play video games more. You would think they would, in theory, be a little bit better because most of their friends are going to want to play. They're going to, like, that's the video games are always viewed as a younger person's thing. So you would think the younger guys would be better at this, but you never really know. So, yeah, Patrick Beverley one still kind of intrigues me. I didn't strike him as a video game player. But again, I think he's just a competitive guy, so any sort of competition, I bet he want to be involved. And DeAndre Ayton, too, was a younger guy who was probably into video games. And also, I'm just curious to see how many people pick their own team. Like, it's like, if you're KD, do you use the Nets? Like, if you're Trae Young, do you not use the Hawks? Because, again, the Hawks aren't, like, the best team in the game. So I'm curious to see, like, who they choose and how, like, the matchups work with that. Because, obviously, if you play video games or if you played 2K, Madden, MLB, FIFA, you know that, like, unless you're really good with a team, which, again, maybe these guys are really good with a specific team, the matchups matter. Like, you can't, like, if you were playing, like, if anybody, in the last couple of years, if you played with the Warriors, with KD and stuff, or you played with, like, the Heat back in the day, with, like, LeBron and D-Wade, like, you couldn't just face them up against, like, the Cavaliers. Well, not like the old Cavaliers, like, with Kyrie and Deion Waiters and stuff. You couldn't match them up with the Heat, or you couldn't match up who's a bad team? Like, you could match up with, like, the Kings, with, like, the Warriors last couple years, unless, again, you were really good with that team. So I'm curious to see which teams these guys pick and how they go about choosing them, because, again, maybe certain people have certain teams they like to use, and if both players want to use the same team, how would that work out, stuff like that. So I'm curious to see about all that. But yeah, I just want to see, like, if anybody, I guess, like I said, it's competition, so we'll see how good or how bad anybody is. But I'm more so just curious to see, like, what teams people play with, because I think that can say a lot about either their skill level, their confidence in themselves, or maybe their lack of respect for their opponent. Just if you see people picking bad teams on purpose, then it's like, hey, they maybe don't think your skills are that good, or they think they're a lot better than maybe they really are. Or I'm also just curious to see if any of these guys just, like, play each other on the regular, so that they could have that sort of trash talk, like, oh yeah, I always beat you anyway, that kind of stuff. I'm just, like I said, I'm interested to see anything competitive. At this point in time, not really going to complain from what I have, and again, shout out to 2K and everybody involved. They're putting this together. 2K, the NBA, ESPN, I guess, for televising it, because they could have just done this on their own and, like, live streamed it or something, but the fact they're putting it on TV, which, again, they don't really have much else to put on TV, so they need stuff to fill those slots up. And so at least give us something to watch and to talk about and all that fun stuff. So I look forward to that this coming weekend and next week as well. But yeah, it should be an interesting one. It should be interesting for my gamers out there. So, I mean, you know how big esports is, and obviously this isn't like an esports. It means it's not a big esports type tournament, but it's a similar aspect, and obviously you can get a glimpse into, like, what, you know, I think, no, ESPN or ABC or somebody, they've shown other esports on their platforms or on their networks, so this isn't like a first time, but this is cool for 2K, because 2K normally doesn't get showcased in this kind of manner. I don't think. I know they have the 2K League, but I don't know if it ever got put on ESPN or ESPN2. But yeah, regardless, cool. It gives us something to watch. Not going to complain about that. So after this next break, we're going to come back. We're going to talk about the CBA and not the collective bargaining agreement, as we've had in the past couple weeks, but the Chinese Basketball Association, who was set to get started up in this week or this month, and now the season got pushed back a little bit further, and just how that could be, and how it's something that the NBA and other leagues may want to keep an eye on, just because China has kind of died down a little bit, but they're still trying to figure out when and how they can implement or get their sports running back up. So we'll talk about that, see what kind of hurdles or struggles they're going through right now, and just how they could get it back together, and what that, again, could mean for sports here in America. So we'll talk about all that right after this break. Stay tuned.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
We are back. We're doing the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast. So, as I mentioned, the China, or the Chinese Basketball Association, was set to restart its season very, very soon, but now there has been a delay on that for the time being. When was it? Oh, we'll get into it. It's planned to restart in April. Like in a couple weeks, but now it's getting pushed back to May and further. So like I said, we'll get into all that. So this is from CBS Sports, if you wanted to read the article on it. China orders Chinese Basketball Association and other sports delay return, per report. While NBA owners remain optimistic. Good Lord, okay. The NBA owners remain optimistic that the 2019-2020 season can be salvaged in some way. The league isn't any closer in knowing when it will be safe to resume play as coronavirus continues to spread across the United States. The one marker that everyone was looking at, though, was when the Chinese Basketball Association would resume, However, the return date of the CBA is more unclear now after the Chinese government issued an order on Tuesday that restricts all group sporting events from resuming play, per ESPN's Brian Windhorst. The CBA initially planned to return April 15th after halting its season in late January due to COVID-19, but after not receiving approval from the government to continue playing, the league decided to delay its return even further to May. Now, with the new order in place, which has no timetable on when it will expire, the return date for the season is up in the air. The decision to delay the return of the CBA reportedly stems from concerns made by sports officials who are wary about the unknown number of asymptomatic carriers. I should know that, obviously, by now. That word's been floating around for weeks. But asymptomatic carriers who could potentially pass the virus on to someone else. Even though questions remain regarding when the CBA will resume play, teams are still telling its players that there is a chance the season is salvaged, per ESPN's Jonathan Givony. Over half of the American players in the CBA league traveled back to China to resume the season under the assumption that things would pick back up soon. Now, with an unclear return date, players like Jeremy Lin and Lance Stevenson, who traveled back and self-quarantined for 14 days, are reportedly stuck in China and concerned about potentially playing into July and August to finish out the season, which would be unfortunate for them. Before the Chinese government announced an official order, the league planned on sending its 20 teams to 2 different locations and playing out the remainder of the season. There were also discussions of having players' temperatures tested multiple times a day and playing games without fans in attendance in an attempt to avoid spreading the virus even further. All this could still be on the table, but obviously it won't happen so they can officially resume play, which no one knows when that is. So there is that. there is that. China, though, isn't the only country where it's sports season, whereas pro basketball leagues have had issues trying to like get restarted again. In Japan, their B League tried to make a return in late March, but after a reportedly chaotic weekend, decided to cancel the rest of the season. The South Korea's basketball league, the KBO, decided to cancel the remainder of the season due to safety concerns because of the coronavirus. While this doesn't entirely reflect on what the NBA should expect when it tries to resume play potentially in the summer, it's a bit discouraging. The spread of the coronavirus has slowed down in China, and South Korea has been lauded, if you've been paying attention, obviously you know, for its efforts in helping to combat the virus, and still have not been able to get back to normal in terms of like sports. Like maybe life is more back to normal than it was, but in terms of sports, nothing still is going on yet. So that's obviously not a good sign for the NBA, which again we'll touch on in a second. With the continued delay in China to restart the CBA, the NBA's potential return date of June after just 3 months off looks to be optimistic given what is happening around the globe. So yeah, I think that last sentence kind of pretty much captures where American sports are at right now, where it's like, all right, so everything kind of stopped a couple weeks ago. I think we're going on like 3, maybe 4 weeks. I don't remember exactly when in March everything stopped, but everything kind of stopped in March. And there has been belief from people that, we'll be back together by June, we'll be back together. We'll be back to sports, we'll be able to resume by June, all that stuff. And I'm just like, the way it's looking around, again, in other countries who have done a better job, especially South Korea, as evidence says, they basically, like, they attacked this thing harder than maybe any country has. I don't know for certain about that, but just off the top of my head, or I don't say maybe better than any country has, but at least in terms of the perception of it, that they were one of the best countries in terms of attacking, getting the curve flattened and doing everything they could to make sure everybody was as safe and there was little casualties as possible. So if they still can't play sports there, where things are basically under control, then how can you expect sports to be played literally anywhere else? Where, you think about even here in America, are there steps taken to help flatten the curve? Yes, to a degree. Obviously, I think there's 30 states that have stay-at-home orders, are basically just like, unless you're an essential worker or you're going to the grocery store or something, like, don't leave your house. Stay, like I said, so you can, like, help flatten this curve. But again, it's 30 states. There are 50 states. So that means 20 states aren't doing anything about this. I don't say not doing anything about this. So let me not go that far. But 20 states aren't issuing a stay-at-home order, which means people are still leaving their house freely. Places are closed down and stuff, but not everybody is. Not all places are. I know, obviously, Florida's one of the bigger ones in terms of they've been doing everything they can to not put a stay-at-home order in place. They've started to close. I guess it kind of depends where you are, but the governor as a whole hasn't done it yet. Some of the towns, some of the counties or whatever have done. They've closed down their beaches or whatever, but there is not an official, like, statewide mandate to be like, hey, this is what we're doing. So because of that, it's hard to say if and when stuff will be able to get back up, because it doesn't seem like everybody in the country is on the same page with this. Even just I don't listen to the briefings anymore, but if you did listen to, like, when the president was giving his updates, the daily coronavirus updates and stuff, he even seemed kind of uncertain from day to day or from press conference to press conference, just how bad this could get, or how good of a job we were doing on it, or like what kind of supplies or different things we'll have, or all that kind of stuff. So it's hard if the guys at the top don't really have a good idea of when this is going to be done, then how can we expect to plan anything at all? Like I said, depending on the state you are in, certain states have done a better job. I know New York's had to be on top of it because they're like the epicenter in the United States currently. They have the most cases out of any state. And part of it's just because they have so many people in New York City, and obviously a lot of them use public transportation. No one's really driving. They're all in a lot of communal spaces. Everything's like so close together that it's bound to happen. But yeah, so they've had to be on top of it. By association, New Jersey had to be on top of it just because they're so close, and a lot of people go into the city to work. So, and especially if you're in North Jersey, it's very close to New York City. So, a lot of people traveling between the two. So you got to work on that. California, It's been another state that's had to be on top of it. I know Washington was a big one for a while. I think that's maybe slowed down, or at least it just got overtaken by New York. I know Ohio was a big one. I think they were back a couple weeks ago saying that they already had they already knew 1,000 people potentially could have had it, but they couldn't get everybody tested. So there's that. I know Michigan's going through some stuff. I mean, they're not the only state. There's a lot of states going through some stuff. Obviously, it's touched every state at this point. But due to the fact that not everybody's on the same page on how to handle it, where at least in these other countries like South Korea or China, after they reached to a certain point, everybody was on board with like, all right, this is what we're doing to stop it. Since there's outside of the president saying that the official the unofficial guidelines to be social distancing guidelines were extended through the end of April. There's no been an official hey, everyone needs to stay at home, everyone needs to do this, everyone needs to do that. They're still leaving it up to the states, and because of that, not everybody's doing the same thing. Thus, we'll have stuff growing and decreasing at different rates in different places. And I'm saying because of that, that's why you can never really know when stuff's going to get started back up. It's because it's a lot of every place, or not every place, but places are doing it differently. And with that, then it's hard to say when stuff is going to really start to slow down as a whole in the country. Obviously, it may start slowing down here, it may start slowing down there, but as a whole, in order to get all, because again, it's not like there's sports in almost every state, I'm pretty sure. If not pro sports, then there's college sports, so then obviously that extends into the college football season. But there's pro sports in a majority of the states. So as much as it sounds good to be we're just going to put everybody here and put them in this state or put them in this city and have them all play out, it's just that's not feasible at the moment. Just because again we don't know when it'll be safe for these guys to be able to congregate in one area at the same time, or will we still need to be social distancing come June, or no one really knows. Like I said, there's countries out there who have done a good job, at least in the eyes of the public, in kind of controlling this virus, and they're not ready to play. How can we expect the USA to be ready to play anytime soon? Because depending on who you ask, we've been a little slow to respond, we weren't necessarily as prepared as we could be. And April is probably going to be the real test, because if it's starting to slow down by the end of April, all right, maybe we'll be able to get back to a regular life in June. But if it's still going up throughout the whole month, because it's obviously going to keep going up for the next couple of days, couple of weeks. I mean, if you've been looking at the stuff out of Florida and even Louisiana, I forgot to mention that, New Orleans too, they've been hit bad, but they had everyone was out there for Mardi Gras and partying, and then just oh, we shouldn't have done that. Yeah, of course. Same thing with Florida and spring break. A lot of people went on spring break, and when to find out, probably wasn't the best idea. But hey, you live and you learn. Some people won't live from this. That's the whole reason why we needed to be on top of this from the beginning, because if they had closed the beaches down and stuff like that, people wouldn't have, or put travel restrictions in place, people wouldn't have gone. Now they wouldn't be dealing with the spike in numbers that Florida's kind of dealing with at the moment, or other places are dealing with, because people traveled to Florida and then came back and all that foolishness. So there's that. But yeah, so the CBA and other sports leagues around the world are going to be stuff that American sports fans will want to keep an eye on, because once they get back started, then at least you have in theory, you have a timetable of when American gets started back up, in terms of when sports and stuff can get ramped up again. Because they're going on what I think CBA is going on now. If they start up in May, which they may not even, they're going on 3 months. I think they ended in late January, I should say. So they're going on 3 months now of no CBA. So if you go 3 months from May, that's June, early to mid June. And even then, you're not going to be able to start stuff back up right once, unless everybody's in, because we got to get people back together. You got to get them practicing, get everybody back in the game shape and stuff, so people don't go out there and just get themselves hurt. So in that best case scenario, we're talking about July. And now if we're starting stuff in July, it's all right, how late the season's going to go, and then what happens for the next season? It's be a whole mess. So that's what I'm saying. There's a very, very, very good chance that the NBA doesn't get played the rest of this year, and even if it. And again, that's just assuming we have this stuff under control by June or July, which there's no guarantee we will, because no one really knows how bad this is going to get over here. So that's the thing, is when there's no real end in sight, it's hard to prepare or plan for the future when you don't know what to expect or what's coming. So that's kind of the unfortunate stuff. You could, like I said, you hope to look to other countries to see to have a borderline, like a baseline timetable, but because no other sports leagues around the world are starting back up, more or less, it's hard to get that. Even like I said, even in the countries where they've got it under control now, they're still not starting back up because they still don't deem it safe. So I'm saying if they're not ready, then who knows when America's going to be ready. So I would just pump the brakes on any sports fans thinking stuff will be back up in June. July is probably best case scenario in terms of sports. Now, people may be able to go back to work and go outside and hang with a small group of friends before then, but sports, I don't see sports starting back up before July, honestly. And that's if we all, as a country, adhere to what the medical professionals are saying. Because if we don't do that, because a lot of people still are out there doing their old thing, they still don't want to be bogged down by the rules and guidelines from the government, which is normally a good thing, because again, America is a land of a lot of freedoms, and there's not a whole lot of governmental control on our lives. But because of that, now when the government is trying to control our lives, they're just like, no, I'm not going to listen because I've never had to do this before, and that's part of the issue. When these other countries, like China's or some of the countries are overseas, they've had where the government has had more say and more control over what the people can and can't do. So this is new. This is nothing new for them. When the government's like, hey, don't leave your house. All right, no one's leaving their house. As opposed to America, you say that and it's like, I hear you, but like I still want to do this, still want to do that, still want to do this. I've always done this, like why should I change now? And that's the unfortunate part about being an American, is that we've had so much freedom that whether you think that, and it's not necessarily our faults, it's just like that's the way the country's been run. So now when we have things where we need everyone to listen to the government, they're just like, nah, I think I'm good. And that's why we're going to be in this for a little bit. So like I said, buckle up, strap in. We're going to be on this ride for a while. Don't expect to get off too soon. Like I said, best case scenario, I think, and I'm not a medical professional, best case scenario, I think sports start back up in July, and even that may be a little ambitious at this point. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully it starts back up sooner, but I just don't see it happening unless, again, all 50 states get on board, and that doesn't seem like it's happening at the moment. It may take the rest of this month for everybody to get on board, and even then, like, it's going to take weeks in order to get them back up to where everyone else has been. It's going to be a whole mess. So, like I said, be prepared for sports to be gone for quite a while. But at least, like I said, we got the MJ doc. Better than nothing. But yes, after this, haven't done any football talk yet. So after this break, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about a couple decently big names. Not like Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or like Odell level big, but some pretty big names, especially if you're a football fan, that are currently on the trade block. So we'll talk about that. Talk about some of their potential suitors and where I think they could end up if and when these guys are traded. Because it seems like both these guys want out from their respective teams, so it's more of when than an if. But like I said, we'll talk about all that stuff right after the break. Stay tuned.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, the first player that could and probably will be on the move at some point, don't know if it'll be before the draft, after the draft, we'll see. Well, the first player is defensive end from the Jacksonville Jaguars, Yannick Ngakoue. I mean, I believe we talked about him a little bit already on the pod, but he's just a guy that his name's been swirling in trade rumors for a few days now, just because, he's already expressed his displeasure with the organization, with the front office. He's expressed his desire to be off the team, and obviously he's not the first guy. The same thing happened with Jalen Ramsey. I don't know if Dante Fowler necessarily expressed his displeasure, but he was another guy that got traded. Calais Campbell got traded just this offseason. It seems to be they're kind of moving on from that. All the players that were around for their last good team in 2017 when they went to the AFC Championship game, and honestly could have won if not for a less aggressive play calling to be in the first half, and maybe even that Miles Jack fumble recovery that was blown dead. Or I think it was even, it wasn't even ruled a fumble. I think it was, it wasn't even like blown dead after he recovered. I think it just wasn't even ruled a fumble if I remember correctly. But regardless, they didn't get that turnover. You could have potentially scored, and that might have changed the game. But so yes, from NFL.com. Since the Jacksonville Jaguars slapped the franchise tag on defensive end Yannick Ngakoue, the presumption has been that the quarterback disruptor is a prime tag and trade target. No, tag and trade candidate, I should say. Teams are checking in to see about the availability. NFL Network's Mike Garafolo, reported Tuesday that the Jags have heard from multiple teams about the possibility of trading for Ngakoue. Per sources informed with the situation, Ngakoue responded to a report underscoring his desire to leave Jacksonville. This was from Tuesday morning. Let's agree to this. The Garafolo tweet was, the Jaguars have heard from multiple interested teams about the possibility of trading for defensive end Yannick Ngakoue, who turns 25 today. The Jags value him and won't give him away for little return, but it'll be interesting to see how this plays out as we draw closer to the draft. And Yannick Ngakoue said, let's agree to disagree. While I hold a man from taking care of his family, it's obvious my time is up in my current situation. Let's both move on. And he tagged the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I think that's going to be the biggest issue for the Jaguars, is that they really have no leverage here. The only leverage is I guess they could keep him, but again, he doesn't want to play up for the franchise tag. He wants to get paid, wants to get his money. And he's made that blatantly obvious. It's kind of the same thing with, not the same thing with Stephon Diggs a little bit, but he expressed his pleasure with Kirk Cousins over the earlier in the season, and then obviously once he tweeted out a couple hours before he was traded something about like new beginnings or something along those lines. So again, it's hard to say how much value Ngakoue will have, because obviously he's a younger guy, only 25, or just turned 25. His pass rusher plays a premier position, so the Jaguars don't want to give him away for nothing, but they also, any team that's trading for him is well aware that they're going to have to pay him big money, so they're not going to want to give up a whole lot, maybe the Rams, who gave up 2 first-round picks for Jalen Ramsey. And while that made sense at the time, he was like kind of all right for them. The team didn't didn't make the playoffs, and now they have to cut Todd Gurley because they have to. Well, because of his knee situation, but also they just don't have the money to pay everybody. As currently constructed, they're already paying Brandin Cooks a lot of money, who we'll talk about in a second. They're paying Jared Goff a lot of money. They're paying Aaron Donald a lot of money. They still have to re-sign or give a contract extension to Jalen Ramsey. It's a whole. Cooper Kupp's going to be coming up for an extension too. Like, they're going to need to pay people. So you have to make tough decisions about that. So then that's what I'm saying. The Jaguars have little leverage in that they don't have to trade Ngakoue, but at the same time, everyone around the league knows that he doesn't want to be there. So it's like how much can you really get for him, or how much should you really be asking for a guy that it's not like it's unknown that he wants out. If I'm say, even DeAndre Hopkins didn't go for a first round pick, so it's like when you look at that, you're like, Ngakoue has been very good, but it's like, all right, come on. But yeah, it's not like I'm just randomly trading for like Aaron Donald, or I'm randomly trading for like J.J. Watt or something just on a whim, where it's like unknown that he wanted to be out and it's kind of a surprise to everybody. This guy's openly expressed his displeasure with the organization, openly expressed his desire to be traded. So it was like, how much am I giving a guy that you know you're not going to be able to have on your team next year? No matter, there's not very much you're going to be able to do or say between now and then in order to get him to be back on your team, which is obviously evident by the fact that he hasn't signed the franchise tag yet. Because if he was okay with that, he would have signed it by now. But he hasn't, because he doesn't want to be a part. He doesn't have to sign it, I guess, until he's officially traded. So once he signs it, you know he's probably going to get traded soon thereafter. So, which is one of those weird things. And I mean, since coming into the league in 4 seasons, he's 37.5 sacks. It's almost a 10 sack a year average. And like I said, his name's been coming up. He's been posting a lot of pictures recently, which may be trolled, but maybe his desire. He did the same thing with the Giants earlier in the offseason with Lawrence Taylor. He's been posting a lot of like Reggie White and Eagles and like Ryan Dawkins pictures on his Instagram account. As of the start of free agency, Mike Garafolo said that the trade talks were pretty quiet at the time, so we don't know if that's just what he's hearing about the teams that are interested in him, or that's just like him expressing where he wants to go. I don't know, or maybe he might just be a troll. That's not out of the realm of possibility. But yeah, so I'm saying you're gonna have to pay him for whoever does decide to trade for him. Last offseason, D Ford traded for a second round pick. After I think he was franchise tagged, or he might have just been. I know Frank Clark, I'm pretty sure was franchise tagged, and he traded for a first round pick. So, and they both obviously got paid. So they're going to want that. Obviously, Clowney was traded for a third and some extra players, and after he was franchise tagged. So again, it's all kind of relative. Yeah, the Eagles are one team that could. I don't want to say use him. Anybody can use a pass rusher, but they don't really need him. They have other issues, but their name has been floating around out there. I think. The Seahawks could be on him depending on what happens with Clowney. And I think that's probably going to be the biggest thing. Maybe what's holding up a trade is that his agent's going to want to know what Clowney gets on the open market, because then that'll help set the parameters for the deal he's going to have to get whenever he's traded to wherever. Because basically, unless his team just wants to get out in front of it first and set the market, that's probably why the trade's getting held up, is because Clowney hasn't signed yet, and so then they don't know what the going rate for pass rushers on the open market is, and that'll obviously help determine what kind of deal he will get whenever he is traded. So I'm saying the Eagles could be in on that, just because again they could probably use a young pass rusher off the edge, because Derek Brandin, that's been a little up and down, inconsistent, deal with some health problems the first couple of years in the league. Also, like I said, the Seahawks, if they don't bring back Clowney, definitely an option. The Giants are still an option. I mean, obviously, they're not trading their first round pick, because no one's trading a top 4 pick for Ngakoue, I don't think. But who knows? We'll get him in thanks. But yeah, they could definitely use some pass rush help, so that's another option. I'm trying to think where else around the league could probably use. I mean, everybody in France, everybody could use an extra pass rusher. But I'm trying to think the other teams that were like in desperate need of a pass rush. Those are probably the 3 teams I can think of off the top of my head that seems to make a degree of sense, because also they also got to pay him. So a team may need a passer, but they won't be able to afford his big salary. And even with take the Eagles for example, one thing they know how to do is work the salary cap with Howie Roseman back there. Like you saw the deals that they made this offseason, they're not paying anybody that big of a money, at least in terms of this year. I think they signed a bunch of guys on defense for the same price that Byron Jones getting paid from the Dolphins. So even maybe the Dolphins might want to trade for him. But I mean, they signed a couple guys in free agency, but he's young. They have the draft picks to do it, though. We'll probably not talk about this on this podcast, but another one maybe closer to the draft about the potential, or even if the Dolphins do trade up for the first overall pick, because it seems like a thing that they're trying to do, or at least they want to do. Because I mean, obviously, why would you not go get Joe Burrow if you can? I think they have everybody 14 picks or something like that. So they have the ammunition to do it if the Bengals want to trade back. But if I'm the Bengals, don't trade back. You need a quarterback. Even for all those picks, you still need a quarterback. So yeah, those are probably the 3 teams I can think of right now. Let me. I'm trying to think of anybody else that is in desperate need of a pass rush. I mean, Patriots probably could use a pass rush. Some pass rush up, they're not going to do it. The Lions need pass rush help, but they're not going to trade for Ngakoue, I don't think. I don't think he'd want to go there. Maybe the Vikings. I mean, they let go of Everson. No, they let go of Everson Griffin. So they need someone opposite Danielle Hunter. They've got a first round pick for Stephon Diggs, so they have 2 firsts. That's not a bad idea. The Bucks are probably all right. Titans. I mean, people talk about Clowney going to Titans, and they play a 3-4, so it'd be a weird transition for Ngakoue, but you never know. They can use some pass rush help too. I mean, like I said, anybody can use an extra pass rusher, but I think Giants, Seahawks, Eagles are probably the teams that'd be most in on him at this time. And I don't know if and when he will get traded and what he'll get traded for, but I don't think this year is that likely because the Giants are going to trade the 4th overall pick for him. Seahawks, I don't think are going to trade 24. I mean, they could trade 24, but I don't think the Eagles are going to trade 21 just because they need other help outside of pass rush. So I don't want to do that. Speaking of help that they need, another guy that's on the trade market is Brandin Cooks from the Rams, who's another guy who's expressed his desire to be free from the team. And he posted a cryptic tweet earlier today about wanting to be done with them. And Peter King put out a report that suggests that the Eagles are probably the best landing spot for him, along with Green Bay, Oakland, and Washington. So, but I guess for Brandin Cooks, the issue with him has mainly just been his concussion history. I think he has on top of the fact that he's been on, this would be his 4th team since 2014. He's only 26, but still, he's on his 4th team. Nobody's really kept him around for more than 2 or 3 years, so there's got to be something with that. That's kind of weird. But also, his biggest thing is just that the concussions have been one of the biggest factors in his career. And also the fact that he's due a lot of money. It's not like his contract is through 2023. His cap hits are at least $16 million for the next 4 years. Though he only has money guaranteed for this season, doesn't have any money guaranteed after that. So I guess you could, in theory, get out of it some way. But it is one of those things where it's like, all right, you trade for, say the Eagles or the Packers. You trade for him. You got a speed receiver at 26, 27, the prime of his career. Has had 4,000 yard. Has had 1,000-yard seasons. Multiple times in the course of his career, but he's also had 5 known concussions in his 6-year career, and 2 within 15 days last year. So it's just like, how many concussions is he away from having to be forced into early retirement? And that's not something you want to trade a high draft pick for, in my opinion. So that's kind of the issue with him. I know Peter King said that the Eagles would trade a second for him, the Packers would trade a second for him, the Raiders could trade a third and a fourth for him because they don't have a second, and Washington can trade an early third for him. An early third for him. So it's like, am I trading, if I'm the Eagles, do I just go into the draft and just draft Jalen Reagor or draft KJ Hamler or somebody else that's a smaller speed guy instead of trading the number 2 pick for Brandin Cooks on a high salary and with concussions? Probably, yeah, because their team needs to get younger. For the Packers, all right, maybe it makes a little bit more sense because Aaron Rodgers is definitely not in the prime of his career anymore. You want to maximize as much time as you have left with him, at least as your quarterback. So it's like, all right, and their pick's 62. So this draft is loaded at the receiver position, so it's not like they're going to be no good receivers left by that point in time. But again, if you don't think any receiver that's going to be available at that point is better than Brandin Cooks is right now, especially when you need a more immediate answer as opposed to someone that's going to take a couple of years. They need number 2 opposite Devontae Adams today. They don't need one in 3 years because again, Aaron Rodgers might not be around in 3 years. You want to maximize them as much as you can today, just because they were in the NFC Championship game. You want to be able to get back, and having somebody to stretch the field and give people somebody to worry about that isn't named Devontae Adams probably is a good idea, especially, like I said, Aaron Rodgers is on the downside of his career, so you want to, every season that passes without a Super Bowl is a missed opportunity for anybody, but obviously, especially when you have a quarterback that's in his mid-30s. And has had the injury history that Aaron Rodgers had. He's had a couple big injuries in his career with the collarbone and stuff, so you don't know how many more hits his body's going to be able to hold up with. I mean, that's just for anybody in general, but obviously, again, as you get older, you're not as strong, your bones get weaker, all that stuff. So the Packers, I think, are a team that I can see doing this if they only have to give up a second. I mean, everyone wants to be linked. Everybody links everybody to the Eagles just because they're an easy team, because it gets the fan base riled up, and people view Howie as an aggressive trader. Though he's never really acquired any like huge name guys via trades, at least that I can think of off the top of my head. Like he's acquired like solid players. I guess Darius Slay's probably arguably the best one. To be honest, he's acquired via a trade, and he traded a third and a fifth for him. That's not a third when they had an extra third. It was not like they traded like second. They don't have an extra second. First, they don't have an extra first. And obviously, those guys are younger than Darius Slay is, but still, it's like how can you, when you are a team that needs to get younger and have as many holes on both sides of the ball as the Eagles have, how can you warrant giving up a first or second round pick when you can use that same pick to draft a guy that may not be as good as Brandin Cooks is right now, but he'll be on your team for the next 5 to 10 years. I suppose the Cooks may only be here for 1 to 2 more seasons, and that's if he's healthy. But again, like I said, the concussion is the scariest thing for me if I'm an Eagles fan, so that would leave me a little wary. But hey, we'll see. Like I said, these are the two names that are kind of floating out there. See what happens with them. I think they'll both be on the move at some point, whether it's before the draft, after the draft, I don't know, but they probably won't be on their respective teams come next season, praying that there is a next season. Even if it starts late, I don't care. Just please don't. I can't go full like calendar year without sports. I'll lose my mind. But yeah, so assuming that there is an NFL season, both Ngakoue and Brandin Cooks will be on different teams. It's just where and when. So we'll see how that plays out. And obviously, whenever that stuff goes down, I will be here to talk about it. So after this last break, I'm going to come back and I'm going to discuss a list, a top 5 list that I saw made by Dan Orlovsky of ESPN. I think it was on Get Up specifically. He ranked the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFC, and I think his list is kind of wild. So I got to redo it. Yeah, we'll talk about what his list was and like the alterations I would make personally right after the break. Stay tuned.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
We are back here again with the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, okay, take that back. This was on when Dan Orlovsky was on First Take. He's normally on Get Up, but I mean, sometimes he comes on First Take, spits his little quarterback knowledge. If you will, obviously not everyone takes him seriously, because again, he is still the quarterback that ran out of the back of the end zone and was part of the 0-16 Lions. But again, he's better than many of us will ever be at anything we do, because he got to the NFL and very few players even get that far. So he knows a lot more about the quarterback position than a lot of us out here do, even if we try to slander him for his mishaps while in the league. At least he's made it there. Most people can't even say they did that, but that doesn't mean his opinion's always right. So he put together a top 5 list, and of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFC, that was again according to Dan Orlovsky. So number 1, consensus, I believe, Russell Wilson. No arguments there. Number 2, Tom Brady. Like, see there, already got a problem with the list. But I'll get through all 5 first, and then we'll go to there. Number 3, Drew Brees. He's in the top 5, no issue with that. Number 4, Carson Wentz. Obviously, if you've followed Dan Orlovsky, you know that he's a big Carson Wentz fan, understandably so, in my opinion. He's very good. Obviously, the whole injury stuff, whatever, that may or may not be a concern, but in terms of his talent on the field, there's not very many quarterbacks in the league, let alone the NFC, better, so I understand that. Even if I guess you could make like I said when I go through my 5, we can make the argument for some other guys to be in this top 5. Then number 5 is Aaron Rodgers. He's been kind of on the downturn the past couple of years. This is more of a reputation thing, but again, he's still Aaron Rodgers, so I can understand why he's in the top 5 until he's officially been knocked out. But my biggest issue probably with the whole list is not necessarily the names, because again, you can make an argument for all those guys being in the top 5 at their position in the NFC. But Brady at 2 was absurd. Now again, do I think he'll probably be better this year? Yeah. I mean, this is arguably the best. I mean, obviously, like I said, he had Randy Moss, so that in and of itself is good. Good enough. You don't even need anybody else opposite him, per se. But in terms of like a 2-receiver tandem, this is probably the best one he's ever had. I don't think he's ever had 2 receivers at this level. He's had Edelman and Gronk for a long period of time. I think he probably had. I know Gronk was at least on. Gronk wasn't on the first Super Bowl team with Moss on there. He was on the second Super Bowl team, so never had them together. Or maybe even if he did, it was a young Gronk. So that's not the same as the 23 touchdown Randy Moss. Or the Gronk that scored. I think he had 18 touchdowns, 17 touchdowns in the season, something like that in the second year. Something absurd. But yeah, so like in terms of 2 receivers, he's never had 2 receivers better than Mike Evans. I almost said Michael Thomas. That would have been bad. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin at the same time. As I said, he's had Randy Moss, and that's, as we talked about in the past episode, the second best receiver of all time, in my personal opinion. But yeah, he's never had 2 receivers at the same time as good as these guys. So you would think, and then obviously Bruce Arians, a good offensive coach. Though obviously he's been with McDaniels and Bill O'Brien and some other guys. So he's had good offensive coaches around him for years. Charlie Weiss back in the days. But obviously Bruce Arians is a very good offensive mind. So you think Brady should be better. But based on what my eyes saw on the field of play last year, you can't have Brady second in the conference in anything. If he stayed in the AFC, he wouldn't be number 2. He's at best number 3 and probably 4 at the highest behind Watson, Lamar, not in this order, but like Watson, Lamar, and Mahomes, obviously. Like he's at best 4. So you come over to this side, he's not better than Russell Wilson. He's not better than Drew Brees off rip. Like that's no faction. I mean, all time, sure, but in terms of the way they're playing right now, I mean, Drew Brees was very good last year. The only thing he had was he just got hurt. Like if you look up his numbers, and we will, because that's what I do here. If you look up Drew Brees' numbers last season, I think he played in, 9 games? I believe is what it was. 11 games, so he only missed 5 games. Went 8-3 in those games, had a 74% completion percentage, threw for a little under 3,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, almost 8 yards per attempt, averaged 270 yards per game, 116 passer rating, and his QBR I know was pretty. I think it was like in the 90s, something like that. So, again, if we're coming off last season, we're not talking about all time. We're talking about last season, like coming into the season, who's in the top 5. There's no way Tom Brady's above Drew Brees. Not a chance. This one, like I said, Tom Brady had he had one of his worst seasons in recent memory. He had a 60% completion percentage. Threw for 4,000 yards, but again, threw over 600 passes. Not that hard to do. And last time he threw over 600 passes, he had almost 4,800 yards, so big difference. Only threw for 24 touchdowns, played all 16 games, so he had less touchdowns than Drew Brees did with 5 more games played, more interceptions, lower yards per attempt at 6.6, lower yards per game at 250, and 253.6 as opposed to like the 270 Drew Brees was at. His passer rating was 88 to Drew Brees like 116 I think it was. His QBR wasn't that high either. So again, and I understand the people around him weren't that good last year, but some of the stuff was a little bit of both. It wasn't just the fact that the weapons were bad. It was also Tom Brady was getting a little bit older. I mean, he's 43 now, and he was just missing some throws. And it's not their line. The Bucks. I mean, the Patriots line wasn't that good last year, but the Bucks line isn't like some. It wasn't. It's not the prime Cowboys lines of like the 2010s when they had like 3 All-Pros on the offensive line at the same time. Like it's not an elite offensive line. And, I mean, I'm not going to say that's the only reason why James was as bad as he was. He'd still make some boneheaded decisions. But, I mean, it doesn't help when you don't really feel that safe and secure in the pocket. And you feel like you gotta let it rip all the time. And obviously Tom Brady's not at the point where he's just letting it rip all the time. He's not risking those interceptions. So, that's what I'm saying. So, my list would go as follows, starting at 5. I think Brady's probably 5, and even with that, you could argue, based off coming into the season, based off last season, solely last season, you could argue Dak's better than him right now. You could. He's not in my 5, but he easily could have been in. That may or may not be bias on my part, but I don't think it is. I just think certain people are better than him. But again, he threw for 5,000 or almost 5,000 yards last year. Or did he throw for 5,000? He might have thrown for the official 5. For the big 5-0. Oh, it threw for 4,900. So almost 5,000 yards, 30 touchdowns last year, 11 picks, had almost 100 passer rating, 300 yards per game. His QBR is pretty high, I believe. Doesn't show that on Pro Football Reference. That's kind of odd. But against the ESPN stat, so whatever. But yes, you would argue he's better than Brady. Kirk Cousins, another quarterback that was very good last year. Threw for 3,600 yards, almost 70% completion percentage, only 6 interceptions, 26 touchdowns, passer rating over 100, QBR I think was decently high as well, yards per attempt, 8.1. So yeah, you could argue he was better. You could even argue what could have been his potential successor, Jimmy G, who, I mean, I still don't think he's that good, but based on last season, you could argue he's been better. He had almost 70% completion percentage, 69%, almost 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, which is, I mean, that part's a little high. But 102 passer rating, if you believe in that kind of stuff. Not everybody believes in passer rating, but if you do, I mean, his was 14 points higher, I think, than Brady. So you could argue that Brady's not even a top 5 quarterback in the NFC right now, and you could have legit argument. I'm not going to make that argument. I'm going to say he's 5, but it's hard to say for certain that he's definitely not 2. Let me just put it that way. He's definitely not number 2 in the NFC. So 4 to me is my boy Carson Wentz. Obviously, again, that's probably going to be more of a controversial one because not everybody has faith in him the way that I do, just because I've seen him at his peak, and him at his peak is MVP level, which is not something a lot of other people have, especially in, like I said, his second year in the league. He would have been an MVP, would have continued the trend. That would have been, 3 straight second-year guys winning MVP if he would have run it, which he should have. They gave it to Brady as pity. Again, if he plays the last 13 games instead of the first 13 games of the year, he wins MVP, so it's just kind of dumb the way that was done. But whatever. I think it was only 1 off the league leading touchdowns with 3 less games. It was the fact that he didn't get MVP was just dumb to me. But whatever. It would have been then him, Mahomes, Lamar. It would have been 3 straight second-year guys winning MVP. Should have been, but is what it is. Yeah, he's still up there. I mean, he had the similar situation as Brady in terms of, his offensive line is better, but the lack of weapons was evident. Him more so due to injury as opposed to just even, I guess although, here's the injuries too, because N'Keal Harry was supposed to be helpful, and he missed the first half of the year. Edelman missed some games. They really didn't have much else outside of that. But again, in the 16 games he played, he threw for over 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, had a passer rating in the 90s. QBR, I believe, was higher than Brady's as well. Over 250 yards a game, which, I mean, that's not that great. But again, when your top 2 receivers miss over 15 games combined, it's bound to happen. Even their third receiver missed a big chunk, a good chunk of games, especially at the end of the year. You still in the practice squad guys many of us, unless you were an Eagles fan, had never heard of before the season started. So, and they still made the playoffs with that, won 4 straight games. So I'm not putting him above him just yet. Again, because if he gets D-Jack healthy, or they get him a big time receiver in the draft, which maybe they will be able to. Maybe they'll still trade for one. Obviously, like I said, they could trade for Brandin Cooks, and having him helps out the team. Like they just need speed on that offense. Then he could be back in close to MVP form. Maybe not exactly, but he could go back to being a perennial 4,000 yard. I guess we only throw 4,000 yards once, but I'll go back to throwing for 4,000 yards again, 30 touchdowns. single-digit interceptions like he's been doing. And that could happen again, over 100 passer rating, which he had the last 2 seasons. And that could happen again. So I think he's probably 4. He could be higher because I'm putting Aaron Rodgers at 3 mainly on reputation because he's been a little the last couple of years as well. I mean, 2018 he threw for 4,000 yards, but 25 touchdowns, 2 picks, only 62% completion percentage. Even passer rating stuff aside, he doesn't throw that many interceptions, but numbers are just kind of whatever. Last season, he barely eclipsed 4,000 yards, which is obviously rare for him in a full season. He's been like a perennial 4,000 yard guy for most of his career. He just barely clipped it. 62% completion percentage again, 26 touchdowns, 4 picks. He's going to have a high touchdown interception ratio. That's just what he does. But when you saw him, especially in that playoff game, it was both times they played the 49ers. He just looked overmatched. There were the points throughout this year where I think he had the one game with 5 touchdowns, if I remember correctly. The one. I feel the Raiders game in week 6, 7. He threw for 5 touchdowns. So if you take that, obviously you take everybody's best game out, their numbers are dip. But in the 5 touchdowns, if you take that out, he had 20. So he only had 21 the other 15 games, which is it's over 1 a game, but still, that's not Aaron Rodgers type numbers. Aaron Rodgers is a guy that's had over 30 touchdowns a lot of years in his career, over 40 touchdowns a couple times in his career. He's 26 touchdowns is not that much for him, especially in a full season. So that's what I'm saying. He's been kind of on the downturn a little bit. Still going to give him benefit of the doubt. At his peak, arguably the most talented guy, not named Mahomes in NFL history. I still think Mahomes will go down as the most talented quarterback, not the greatest, but the most talented. We'll see about the greatness level. But like I said, he's probably the most talented guy we've seen in the league, arguably ever, just the things he can do. Aaron Rodgers was that before him. So it's hard. He's won a Super Bowl, won 2 MVPs? No, he's been an All-Pro twice. I think he's won 2 MVPs. Yeah, 2 MVPs, 2011 and 2014. So, like I said, Aaron Rodgers that's a reputation number 3 because based on last season, he's not the 3rd best quarterback in the NFC, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, especially if they get a receiver for him in the draft or trade for it or what have you. And like I said, my 2 and 1 are, we already talked about that. Drew Brees and Russell Wilson. I think that should be consensus around talking heads. I understand maybe Brady's greater than Drew Brees all the time, but right now, you can't say anybody's playing better than those two in the conference, at least. Obviously, you got the Mahomes and Deshaun and Lamar. You could argue are better than those guys, but as of right now, I don't see anybody in the NFC. Not that they can't be surpassed, because they could easily be surpassed by any of these guys in the top 5, or even, like I said, Dak puts together another good year. If the Cowboys ever decide to pay him. Kirk, Jimmy D bounces back. Got Kyler Murray skyrockets with DeAndre Hopkins now on his team. Jared Goff gets back to his 2017, 2018 form pre-Super Bowl. Yeah, you never know. But like I said, right now, Russ 1, Drew Brees 2, then it's everybody else. And I don't really see how there's much of an argument for that, but apparently Dan Orlovsky did not agree with me, so I just have to set the record straight on that. Not that he's going to listen to this and hear me, but I just don't see how you rate Tom Brady based off last season. Based off last season, or last couple seasons, there's no way he's better than Drew Brees right now. And he's obviously not better than Russell Wilson. And like I said, you can make an argument for other guys in the NFC that I didn't even put in the top 5 that could be higher than Brady right now. But like I said, he has a chance to go out there and prove to everybody that last year was a fluke. He's not on the downturn. He can still play until he's 45 like he wants to, or whatever. Belichick shouldn't have let go of him, all that fun stuff. I assume he's going to be out there trying to prove that. And like I said, having Mike Evans and Chris Godwin makes life a lot easier for anybody. But we'll see how he handles that. What happens there. And then see how true these rankings hold, or my list holds, when it comes time for this football season to resume. Hopefully in September. Because like I said, push back to October, I'll live anything else, I'm going to be devastated, honestly. I won't be alone, but I'll honestly be devastated. This will be too long without sports. I can get through maybe the summer. It's going to be tough because, again, we're not really going to be allowed to go outside. Too tough. It's before probably June, so that's going to be kind of annoying with nothing to watch. But at least if we're outside by June, July, all right, I got to be able to get my mind off it. But if we're back September, October, and there's still no football, that's going to be a mess. A whole mess. But yeah, that'll do it for me here today on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. I want to thank you guys for listening. As always, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode. Make sure you're always on top of when we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you could give us a 5-star rating, write us a nice review, be very appreciated, very helpful. Allow us to see if you guys like, if you guys dislike, all that fun stuff. If you're on social media, we're on social media, so you can find us there. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the platforms. We are there, so you can find us. We can talk, we can chat, we can debate, we can discuss, we can help each other get through these very unprecedented and tough times with no sports. I know I'm surviving. I'm currently, not that all of you care, but I'm currently watching Breaking Bad for the first time. Never watch it, don't judge me. But it's a very good show, keeping my mind off the fact that I don't have any sports to watch. And I think I'm also going to start Ozark soon, because I've been hearing a lot of good things on the Twitter. So yeah, I got to see how that goes. But yeah, no, it's on Netflix. Heard nothing but good things about it. You know, have to catch up with. Like I said, I'll get caught up on that once I'm done with Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad right now has got my full attention outside of like work related stuff. So yeah, a great show. I see the hype. I'm like halfway through season 3. I get it. Obviously, I got the 4th and 5th season, which I hear are phenomenal. So I'll be able to judge better once it's all said and done. But yeah, that's just what we got to do now. Just find other ways to pass the time. But during the time you are not doing those things, make sure again you're washing your hands, social distancing, isolating, quarantining if you're sick, getting tested if you can. Obviously, like I said, it's easier or harder depending on the state you're in. But if you feel sick, try to get tested, and if you can't get tested, then, like I said, just make sure you self-isolate yourself from everybody else. Don't go outside, all that stuff, just to, help flatten the curve. Because the sooner the curve is flattened, the sooner we can all resume our normal lives, more or less. Obviously, I don't think anything will ever be completely the same post this pandemic, but at least we'll be back closer to normal than where we're at now. And that's really all we want, just to be able to go out and live our lives more freely than we are currently. So, like I said, the sooner we flatten the curve, the sooner we'll be able to do all of that. But that, again, like I said, that'll do it for me here today. That has been my time. And until next time, peace out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.